The stars were silent, as they had been for millennia. But in the deep reaches of space, a signal, a whisper across the void, shattered the stillness. It came from a place that no one had ventured to in ages, a long-forgotten planet, hidden in the dark corners of the galaxy. This was a world that humanity had once called home. Long ago, it had been abandoned, the last trace of human civilization swept away by the endless march of time. But the signal, it was unmistakable. A message, a call for help. The signal reached the human outpost on the distant moon of a forgotten planet. This small, isolated colony had lived in peace, unaware of the vast history that stretched beyond the stars. To them, Earth was a distant memory, a place their ancestors had left long ago. The Galactic War had been a thing of the past, and the humans were no longer the dominant species in the galaxy. But now, something had changed. The technicians working in the outpost command center were the first to notice the anomaly. At first, it seemed like just another glitch, a random burst of noise, nothing more. But then the pattern became clear. A message, repeating in the same way over and over again. They were no longer alone. Someone, or something, was trying to communicate with them. At the center of the room, Lieutenant Nadia Cortez leaned over the control panel, her eyes narrowing as she examined the strange signal. It was coming from a source far away, much farther than any of the outpost communications had ever reached. The frequency wasn't like anything they had encountered before. It seemed almost ancient, but still it carried a clear message. "Can you decode it?" her superior, Captain Leclerc, asked from across the room, his voice filled with both curiosity and caution. The crew of the outpost had been trained for many things, but they had never been prepared for something like this. Nadia didn't hesitate. She started typing rapidly, the hum of the computer filling the room as it processed the incoming data. The message was hard to make out at first, like pieces of a shattered puzzle, but soon the words began to emerge. It was a warning. "They are coming. The enemies you thought you left behind are back. They remember your name. They will come for you first." The room went silent. For a moment, no one knew what to say. The message was as clear as it was terrifying. Who could this be from? What enemies? The humans had been gone for so long. How could anyone possibly still remember them? "Is this real?" Nadia whispered, almost to herself. Captain Leclerc stepped forward, his brow furrowing in concern. "We need to investigate this immediately. We can't ignore it. If someone knows about us, if they know about Earth, we need to know why." His tone was stern, but even he couldn't shake the fear creeping into his voice. Nadia continued to decode the message, each word sinking into her gut like a stone. The last part of the message struck her hardest. "They will come for you first." The message wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. Without wasting another second, Leclerc ordered a full analysis of the signal's origin. The crew began scanning the stars, trying to pinpoint where this message had come from. The tension in the room grew. Whatever was out there, whoever sent this warning, it was something big, something powerful. Then an alarm blared. The screen in front of Nadia blinked as new information began to appear. The signal was coming from an old, forgotten part of the galaxy. The shattered expanse, a region of space that no human had dared enter for centuries. It was a place of legend. Rumors spoke of strange civilizations, alien artifacts, and dangers that could not be understood. "We have to go there," Leclerc said, his voice quiet but firm. "We need to know who sent this message." Nadia looked up, her face pale. "Captain, this could be dangerous. What if it's a trap? What if—" "I don't care," Leclerc interrupted. "If someone knows we're here, we can't ignore it. We've been living in the dark for too long. We need to face whatever is out there. We're humanity's last hope." His words were heavy with responsibility, and Nadia couldn't help but feel the weight of his decision. In the control room, the entire team had gathered around. Everyone could feel the tension rising. The message had changed everything. What they thought they knew about their past, about Earth, was now in question. Someone out there was hunting humanity. Nadia quickly prepared the communication systems, sending a message to the Central Fleet for assistance. As her fingers flew over the console, a part of her wondered, had this been coming for centuries? Had humanity's past finally caught up to them? "We're going to need a fleet," Leclerc said, breaking the silence once again. "We need to call in reinforcements and prepare for whatever comes next." But as he spoke, a thought crossed his mind. What if there was no one left to help them? The outpost was cut off from the rest of humanity. The world they knew was isolated. Could they stand against an unknown enemy that knew their name, their history? Could they fight back against a force so powerful that it had waited 500,000 years for its moment? The tension in the room reached its peak as Nadia turned to the captain. "We can't waste any more time. We need to send a message to the Central Command, and we need to do it now." Leclerc nodded. "Prepare the ship for departure. We're heading into the shattered expanse." The crew moved swiftly. There was no time to waste. As the ships powered up and prepared to leave the atmosphere, Nadia felt a cold chill run down her spine. They were about to face the unknown, a force they had long since forgotten. And whatever it was waiting for them. The story of humanity was far from over. The forgotten signal had only just begun to reveal its secrets, and what came next would change everything. The small human outpost buzzed with activity as the command center went into full operational mode. The once peaceful, isolated base was now a hive of tension, with every crew member aware that they were no longer just guardians of an abandoned colony. They were the last hope of a species that had long been forgotten by the galaxy. The message had shaken them to their core, and yet they knew what had to be done. They had to go to the shattered expanse. But the question that loomed over them was, what could they possibly face? Captain Leclerc paced back and forth in the war room, staring at the large map of the galaxy projected on the wall. The coordinates for the source of the signal were locked in, showing a region known for its dangerous anomalies, unpredictable gravity fields, and treacherous paths. The shattered expanse wasn't just a name. It was a place of lost ships, abandoned civilizations, and stories that no one truly understood. No one dared venture into it for centuries. And now, the outpost had no choice but to follow the path into the unknown. Lieutenant Nadia Cortez continued working furiously at her console, trying to decipher more details of the message. Though much of the signal had been decoded, there was a peculiar pattern embedded within it, a series of numbers and coordinates that seemed almost like a map of some kind, but incomplete. Nadia's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she tried to piece the puzzle together. The last part of the message haunted her thoughts. "They will come for you first." Who were they? And why was humanity the primary target? As the ship's engines hummed to life, the crew readied themselves for the journey ahead. It was clear that the normal path to the shattered expanse wasn't safe. Far too many ships had vanished, lost without a trace. So instead, they would take a circuitous route, skirting the dangerous gravitational pull of nearby stars, and staying as far from alien patrol zones as possible. But even as they moved cautiously, the crew could feel the weight of their situation. They were being hunted. The realization that someone, or something, had been watching humanity for centuries was enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. The outpost's small fleet of ships took off in the dead of night, the dark expanse of space stretching out before them. As the ships left the atmosphere, the haunting silence of space settled in. Despite the years of peace they had grown accustomed to, there was an unmistakable threat that now loomed large in the distance. Every officer aboard the flagship understood that they were entering a war they hadn't even known existed, and yet there was no turning back now. As they made their way through space, the crew prepared themselves for the worst. Admiral Sarah, the legendary leader of humanity's war fleet, had long since disappeared, leaving behind nothing but a name that was spoken of in hushed tones. Her fleet, once the terror of the galaxy, was thought to be long gone. its ships scattered and forgotten. But now, it seemed, they were humanity's only chance at survival. There was talk among the crew about Admiral Sarah's return. If she could somehow be awakened from cryosleep, her strategies and knowledge could give them a fighting chance against the alien forces that were sure to be waiting for them. The journey to the shattered expanse was long, and the crew remained on edge, unable to shake the growing anxiety that something was watching them. Every flicker of light outside the ship's windows felt like an omen. Every unexplained signal that crossed their systems felt like a sign of an incoming attack. Yet nothing happened. Days passed in eerie silence, and with each passing hour, the sense of unease only grew stronger. The ship finally approached the edge of the expanse. The stars grew dimmer, and the blackness of space seemed to swallow the light around them. At that moment, Nadia received an incoming message. Her hands froze as she saw the source. It was a warning from a passing vessel. It was a faint distress signal, barely readable, but it was enough to make the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The message was simple, but the implications were chilling. Turn back. You are already too late. Captain Leclerc quickly ordered the crew to prepare for evasive maneuvers. The warning had come too close, too timely. Something was out there, something that didn't want them to proceed. Nadia's mind raced, trying to process the significance of the message. Were they too late? Had they already fallen into a trap? The thought made her stomach churn, but there was no turning back now. The crew braced themselves as they entered the expanse. The ship's hull rattled as they passed through the dense fields of space debris. Remnants of ships and long-forgotten planets scattered like broken fragments of a long-lost war. And then something strange happened. A large, imposing shadow appeared on their scanners, too big to be a natural formation, too structured to be debris. It was a fleet, but not any fleet the crew recognized. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, their design sharp and menacing. Alien. Was this the enemy? Had they been waiting all this time? As the shadow grew larger, so did the fear among the crew. They were about to make first contact, but this wasn't a peaceful greeting. No, this was something far more terrifying. The ancient enemy humanity had long forgotten was not only alive, but they were prepared to take back what they thought was theirs. Nadia's heart raced. The crew had made it this far, but the real battle had just begun. Every crew member had to ask themselves one question. Could they survive the coming storm, or would they fall just like all those who had come before them? The fleet entered the shattered expanse, its dark, silent void swallowing them whole. The vastness of space had never felt so oppressive, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The ship's sensors flickered with faint, scattered data, but nothing significant. Just the eerie quiet of forgotten worlds and long-dead stars. Captain Leclerc sat in his command chair, his hands clasped tightly together, a knot of tension in his chest. The crew had been trained for every type of mission, every form of combat, but nothing could prepare them for this. Lieutenant Nadia Cortez sat at her console, her eyes scanning the communication systems. Her fingers danced over the keys, trying to make sense of the strange data they were receiving. The anomaly had only grown more intense, the signal they had picked up growing louder. The closer they got to the coordinates, the clearer it became that something had been waiting for them. And whatever it was, it had been expecting them for a long time. For the past few days, every star seemed to blink out of existence as they passed by. The gravitational anomalies began to intensify, making their course unpredictable. One minute, they were drifting smoothly through the darkness, and the next, the ship's systems would throw up warnings about massive shifts in gravity. The space around them felt like a labyrinth, a place where the laws of physics were bent, where entire planets had once been ripped apart, and where ships disappeared without a trace. A soft beep broke the silence, drawing Nadia's attention back to the console. A new signal was coming through, much clearer than the last. It wasn't like the garbled transmission they had received earlier. This one was direct, almost too clear. It was a voice, crisp and cold. a synthetic voice that sent chills down her spine. Humanity. The single word echoed through the room, as if the ship itself had been holding its breath. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The message seemed to recognize them. Specifically, Nadia's fingers paused over her keyboard. She couldn't believe it. Who, what, could know they were here? Could the signal really be from their enemies? From the alien forces that had once clashed with humanity eons ago? Or was it something else? Nadia quickly activated the communication system, attempting to respond. "This is the human fleet. Who are you?" she called out, her voice steady despite the tension threatening to overwhelm her. But before she could receive a reply, the lights in the command center flickered, and the ship's hull rattled once more. A low, ominous hum filled the room. The sensors went wild as new ships appeared on their radar. Hundreds of them, all around them. The reality of their situation sank in. They weren't just facing a single threat. They were surrounded. "Captain," Nadia shouted, her voice rising with urgency. "We're not alone. There are hundreds of ships. They're right on top of us." Leclerc's eyes hardened. He'd known this was coming, but the reality of it was overwhelming. The fleet was massive, and it was clear now. This wasn't just some forgotten alien species from history. These were the Xorxians, the enemies of humanity. But there was something even more chilling. These ships were familiar. They were designed with technology far beyond what humanity had ever encountered. Their sleek, deadly forms appeared out of nowhere, dropping from the shadows of the expanse, with no warning and no time to react. The ships were closing in, and the crew could only watch as the alien forces moved in on them with terrifying precision. There was no time to escape, no time to hide. The battle had already begun. Captain Leclerc's voice cut through the panic that spread among the crew. "Prepare for battle stations," he ordered, his tone sharp and commanding. "Nadia, get us a safe trajectory. We can't fight them here. We need to break through." Nadia's hands flew across the controls, trying to make sense of the chaotic data flooding her screen. There were too many ships, and their weapon systems were far more advanced than anything they had. The human fleet's strength was in its sheer numbers and experience, but this was no ordinary enemy. They had not only the numbers but superior technology, and they had the element of surprise. Suddenly, the main viewing screen came to life, and the cold synthetic voice from earlier boomed through the comms. "We've been waiting for you, humanity. Your time is over. Surrender now, or face total annihilation." The Xorxian ships were now within striking distance, their weapons activated, and a terrifying beam of energy shot out from one of their larger warships, aimed directly at the human fleet. The first blast struck the outer shields of the lead ship, causing an explosion that sent shockwaves through the entire fleet. The ship rocked violently as the crew was thrown from their seats. Alarms blared, and smoke filled the air. "We can't hold them off like this," Nadia cried, her hands desperately trying to maintain control over the failing systems. "We need to retreat, now." But there was nowhere to retreat to. The expanse was a trap, a vast maze where escape was impossible. The Xorxians knew this. They had planned for this moment. And now, humanity was at their mercy. Captain Leclerc's eyes burned with determination. "We'll fight. We'll survive. We always survive." As the battle raged on, humanity's ships fought with every ounce of strength they had, firing back with everything in their arsenal. The once dormant war fleet, hidden for centuries, was now coming to life. But despite their best efforts, it became clear that the Xorxians were too powerful, too prepared. The odds were stacked against them, and it was only a matter of time before humanity would be forced to make a choice: fight to the last man or surrender and hope for mercy. The next few minutes felt like an eternity. The crew of the human fleet clung to the hope that reinforcements would come, but there was no guarantee. The Xorxians were relentless, and every move the humans made only seemed to bring them closer to the edge of annihilation. But amidst the chaos, something remarkable happened. One of the human ships, heavily damaged but still operational, launched a surprise counterattack. A scattered formation of ships rallied together in a final push, targeting the largest of the Xorxian warships. It was a desperate maneuver, one that had never been attempted before, but it was the only hope they had left. The impact was devastating. The Xorxians' flagship exploded in a massive ball of fire, causing their entire fleet to hesitate for just a moment. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. In the silence that followed, Captain Leclerc's voice rang out again, his tone defiant. "This is far from over. We fight until the last ship is standing. Humanity does not surrender." The battle raged on in the vastness of the shattered expanse. Every moment felt like an eternity as the human fleet struggled to hold its ground against the overwhelming force of the Xorxians. The space around them was filled with flashes of energy, the crackling sound of shields taking hits, and the constant rumble of weapons fire. Ships, once proud symbols of humanity's last defense, were now reduced to debris, their once formidable hulls torn apart by Xorxian fire. Yet, in the face of certain annihilation, something remarkable began to unfold. Captain Leclerc stood at the front of the command center, his face tight with resolve. "Prepare the secondary fleet," he ordered. "We have to keep pushing forward. We cannot let them break us." Nadia Cortez, working tirelessly at her station, glanced at the readings. The human fleet was battered and bruised, but it wasn't finished yet. Her fingers flew over the controls, trying to access the backup systems. They had been forced to use unconventional tactics, but they weren't without merit. Humanity had survived the worst before, and now they had to tap into that same indomitable spirit. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared across the command center, drawing everyone's attention. Nadia's screen flashed red as a new, even more terrifying signal appeared. A massive object, unlike anything they had encountered, was heading toward them. This wasn't one of the Xorxian ships. They were much smaller than this. The massive shape appeared on their sensors with alarming speed. A colossal flagship, at least 5 times the size of any human vessel, loomed large in front of them, moving with terrifying grace. Its hull gleamed darkly in the vastness of space, the edges lined with sharp, jagged patterns that seemed almost organic in design. This was not just an enemy warship. This was something else entirely. The bridge crew fell silent, staring in disbelief at the size of the ship. Its silhouette blocked out entire sections of stars as it advanced, and its weapons were primed, pulsing with an ominous energy. This ship wasn't just an enemy. It was the enemy's ultimate weapon. "This is it," Nadia muttered, her voice a mix of awe and dread. "We can't take on something like that. We're outgunned and outclassed." Leclerc didn't flinch. "We don't run. We faced them head-on." The massive ship was almost within firing range. Its weaponry began to charge, a bright red glow forming along the length of its hull. The Xorxians had prepared for this moment. Their fleets were waiting for the final strike. It was clear they had been gathering all their strength for this decisive battle. But then, just as the crew braced for the worst, a strange phenomenon occurred. The flagship's weapons fired, but instead of striking the human fleet, a bright blue energy field erupted in front of the massive ship, deflecting the blasts before they could reach their target. The energy shield shimmered like a wall of light, bending the beams of fire around it. "Impossible," Nadia whispered, staring in shock. That's human technology." The shield flickered once more, and then, just as quickly, it faded, revealing something even more unexpected. A fleet of human warships. But they weren't just any ships. These were advanced, their sleek hulls reflecting the cold light of the stars. The design was unfamiliar to the crew, but the markings on the ship's sides were unmistakable. The old Earth fleet, the very fleet thought to have been lost forever. "We never left," Captain Leclerc murmured. "They've been hiding in the expanse all this time." The mysterious fleet formed a perfect defensive formation in front of the flagship, acting as a shield to protect the human forces still standing. The sight of these ships, their familiar markings from Earth's forgotten history, was enough to send a surge of hope through the crew. Could this be the long-lost fleet, the one that had disappeared so many centuries ago? As the Xorxian ships adjusted their course to face this new, unexpected force, the atmosphere on the command bridge shifted. The crew went from despair to cautious optimism. Humanity had been caught off guard once before, but now they had a chance. A glimmer of their former might had returned to them, and they had the element of surprise on their side. "Reinforcements have arrived," Leclerc said, his voice steady, but now tinged with something else. "Hope. Now it's our turn to fight." The alien fleet hesitated. A slight moment of confusion passed through their ranks, giving the human fleet a precious moment of opportunity. The unfamiliar warships powered up their weapons, the hum of their engines resonating like a chorus of fury as they moved into position. These ships were equipped with technology lost to time, superior to anything humanity had ever used before. The Xorxians, momentarily stunned by the unexpected arrival of humanity's hidden fleet, hesitated. For the first time in centuries, the balance of power shifted. The tides of war were turning. Humanity wasn't just surviving. It was fighting back, and it was doing so with a strength that surprised even the most battle-hardened alien fleets. The first shots were fired, and the battle resumed with a vengeance. Humanity's fleet surged forward, their newly revealed ships joining the fray. The once hopeless odds now seemed slightly more in their favor. They fought with fury, pushing back against the Xorxian forces, each ship now armed with the advanced technology humanity had once created but left behind. Captain Leclerc could feel the change in the air. This was humanity's moment. No longer would they be the hunted. They were the hunters now, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim their place in the stars. Nadia's fingers flew over the controls, coordinating the battle effort. Each move she made a desperate plea for survival. The crew of the human fleet, battered but determined, fought with every ounce of strength they had, each strike a testament to the will to survive. The Xorxian fleet, though vast and technologically advanced, had underestimated humanity's strength. The final showdown had begun, and it would determine whether humanity would rise again or fall, lost to the annals of history. The battle continued with violent intensity, each clash of energy beams lighting up the vast darkness of the expanse. The Xorxian fleet, initially caught off guard by the sudden appearance of humanity's hidden warships, quickly regained its composure. The alien forces, however advanced and powerful, now faced a new challenge. Humanity was not just fighting for survival anymore. It was fighting for revenge, for its place in the universe. The once dominant Xorxian fleet was now under threat from every direction. The mysterious fleet, human ships thought to be lost for centuries, was not only a formidable force, but their sudden appearance sent shockwaves through the enemy ranks. Humanity's ships, sleek and powerful, displayed a level of technology previously unseen by the Xorxians. Weapons that once only existed in legend were now in full operation. Captain Leclerc stood tall on the bridge, his eyes narrowing as the battle unfolded before him. His every instinct was honed, his battle-hardened mind calculating their every move. There was no room for error. He turned to Nadia, his voice steadied, despite the chaos around them. "Push forward. Get us through their lines. This is our one shot." Nadia's fingers flew over the control panel as she adjusted their trajectory, taking the human fleet into the heart of the Xorxian formation. Her face was a mask of concentration. Every movement, every shift in the fleet's strategy had to be precise. One wrong move, and it could cost them everything. But this wasn't just any battle. It was humanity's return to the stars. It was a fight to reclaim the destiny that had been stolen from them. As the ships maneuvered through the expanse, the Xorxians launched wave after wave of devastating attacks. Their weapons fired relentlessly, targeting the human ships with pinpoint precision. Yet, the newly revealed human fleet wasn't giving an inch. Their advanced shields absorbed the incoming energy blasts, and their retaliatory strikes were swift and deadly. The sight of Exorcian warships being torn apart by human weapons was enough to make even the most hardened commanders on the enemy side question their certainty. The Exorcians had always considered humanity a primitive race, one that would fall to their superior technology. But now, they were faced with a reality that had never entered their calculations. Humanity had been hiding a force far greater than anything they had ever anticipated. The human fleet continued to press forward, cutting through the Exorcian ships with ruthless precision. The mysterious flagship, the massive human vessel at the front of the fleet, moved in tandem with the rest, its massive guns firing in unison with the smaller ships. It was a symphony of destruction, an orchestrated attack that sent shockwaves through the expanse. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Exorcian fleet, their command vessel shook violently as human weapons found their mark. The alien fleet commander, an ancient Exorcian known as Trash, cursed in his native tongue as his vessel reeled from the impact. He watched in disbelief as the human fleet, though outnumbered, showed a ferocity and strength that even he had never seen before. "This cannot be happening," Trash muttered under his breath, his many eyes scanning the unfolding battle. The Exorcians had always prided themselves on their technological superiority, but now they were being pushed back by human innovation, a power they hadn't even realized existed. The battle wasn't just about weapons. It was about the human will to fight, something the Exorcians had underestimated. But Trash was not a fool. He knew the tide of battle could turn at any moment. If he didn't act fast, humanity's unexpected resurgence would end their long-standing dominance over the galaxy. He activated a secret weapon that had been kept in reserve, the Exorcian Singularity Torpedo. A weapon so powerful, it could tear through entire fleets in an instant. He could only hope it would be enough to break the momentum of the human attack. As the massive torpedo was fired, a sickeningly bright light appeared in the distance, growing larger with each passing second. Nadia's screen flashed red as the gravitational distortion of the torpedo rippled through space. It was headed straight for their formation. "Brace for impact," Leclerc shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The human fleet scattered as the torpedo's shockwave rippled across their ranks, the gravity field distorting everything in its wake. Ships strained against the intense forces, shields crackling under pressure. The human fleet's flagship, the one holding the most advanced technology, shuddered under the blast. The energy shield was failing, flickering dangerously as the Singularity torpedo drew closer. But Captain Leclerc had one final card to play. "Activate the counterfield," Leclerc commanded. Nadia quickly initiated the protocol. A strange hum filled the air as the human ships deployed their last-ditch weapon, a gravitational counterfield. The technology was ancient but effective. It could absorb and redirect the forces of the torpedo, causing the Singularity to collapse in on itself. The Exorcian torpedo's trajectory wavered as the counterfield's energy enveloped it. The space around the battlefield seemed to distort for a split second, and then, in a spectacular flash of light, the torpedo imploded in on itself, the energy dissipating harmlessly in the vacuum of space. The Exorcians gasped in horror. Their greatest weapon had failed. For a brief moment, the battle paused. Both sides watched in stunned silence as the shockwaves of the Singularity torpedo faded into the distance. It was as if time itself had frozen. But the moment didn't last long. Humanity's ships, now fully re-energized by the successful defense, rallied again, attacking the Exorcian fleet with renewed strength. "This is not over," Captain Leclerc said quietly, his voice filled with both resolve and uncertainty. "But we've struck a blow they won't forget." The human fleet surged forward, cutting down Exorcian ships one after another. The Exorcians, shaken by their failed weapon and the unexpected resistance, faltered. The once proud fleet began to show signs of weakness. Humanity, the underdog in this war, was now in control. In the distant command centers of the Exorcian warlords, frantic messages were exchanged. Trash's voice, filled with rage, echoed through the comms. Fall back. Fall back. This is not a fight we can win. But it was too late. Humanity had claimed the momentum, and the expanse had become their battlefield. The fight was far from over, but the tide had shifted irrevocably. Humanity's hidden fleet had finally returned to reclaim the stars. The Exorcians had made their mistake, and now humanity would ensure that the galaxy would never forget the human will to survive. The battle between the Exorcians and humanity's revived fleet had reached its peak, and the stakes were higher than ever. The human warships, driven by the knowledge that this was their moment to take back their place in the stars, were relentless. The energy in the space around them was crackling with fury, the once dominant Exorcian fleet slowly starting to falter under the pressure of their unforeseen enemy. Captain Leclerc stood at the helm of the command center, his eyes focused on the battlefield. His hands clenched around the armrests of his chair, his mind calculating each move, each possible outcome. "We've got them on the back foot," Nadia said, her voice filled with determination. "But they're not done yet. They'll try to make one last push." Leclerc nodded grimly. "I know. They have one final weapon left, something more dangerous than anything we've seen before." His words echoed the growing tension in the room. The Exorcians, having realized that their most powerful weapon, the singularity torpedo, had failed, were now resorting to desperate measures. The hidden fleet of humanity, led by their mysterious flagship, had proven too resilient. But the Exorcians were not ones to surrender easily. They had something left. The Exorcian Emperor's personal vessel, an enormous ship capable of destroying entire fleets with its weapons, and a strategic command center unlike any other. "This is their last card," Leclerc muttered. "If we don't destroy that flagship, we'll never be able to end this fight. Everything rests on this moment." Nadia looked at the readings, her eyes wide. "Captain, the Emperor's ship is on the move. It's heading straight for us. Full speed ahead." A chill ran down Leclerc's spine. The Emperor's flagship was a legend, a living fortress that could single-handedly turn the tide of any battle. Its mere presence on the battlefield made it a terrifying adversary. The battle had already been fierce, but now, with this new threat looming over them, it felt like the final, decisive moment had arrived. "All ships, rally around the flagship. We're not going to run this time. We end this now." The command rang through the fleet. The remaining human warships, battered but unbroken, shifted their formations, pulling together to form a tight defensive perimeter around their flagship. The mysterious human fleet, still a strange and powerful presence, closed in as well. The enemy fleet, sensing the threat, also shifted, preparing to unleash everything they had left in their arsenal. "Captain, we've got incoming." Nadia's voice was sharp, and the tension in her words was undeniable. A sudden barrage of Exorcian plasma blasts rained down on them. The human fleet scattered, attempting to avoid the relentless energy fire. The shields on several ships flickered, straining to hold against the intensity of the attack. Leclerc watched with cold intensity as the blast struck the human ships, ripping apart hulls and sending debris into the cold void of space. But humanity had come too far to falter now. The first wave of fire had done damage, but it wasn't enough to break their resolve. "Return fire," Leclerc shouted, his voice steady and strong. "Let them feel what we can do." The human fleet's guns powered up, and within moments, the space around them erupted in a counterattack. The ships fired their heavy weapons with precision, striking the Exorcian forces in a synchronized barrage that tore through enemy lines. The mysterious flagship unleashed its own weapons, blinding energy beams that carved through enemy ships like a scythe through wheat. The Exorcians faltered under the assault, their once overwhelming numbers thinning rapidly as the human forces pushed forward. The Emperor's flagship, the largest ship in the Exorcian fleet, loomed ahead like a shadow, still fighting back with everything it had. But humanity wasn't giving up. Every weapon, every ship, every ounce of energy was directed toward that one final target. "We need to focus on the Emperor's ship," Leclerc ordered. All ships target the flagship. This is the moment we've been waiting for. The human fleet surged forward, breaking through the Exorcian defenses with everything they had. Nadia's fingers flew across the console, coordinating the final strikes as the massive flagship loomed closer. The air was thick with tension, the final showdown imminent. Just as the flagship was about to reach its firing range, the unexpected happened. The Exorcian Emperor's flagship began to tremble. The hum of its engines faltered, and the energy signature from its weapons faltered as well. There was a moment of confusion, a ripple of uncertainty that passed through the Exorcian fleet. The Emperor's ship, the invincible fortress they had relied on, was losing power. "What's happening?" Nadia shouted, her hands shaking with disbelief. "The flagship's power systems are failing." Leclerc's eyes narrowed. He'd heard rumors of ancient weapons buried in the deep corners of the galaxy, weapons that could disrupt entire fleets. But this was something else entirely. The Emperor's ship was crippling itself from the inside. "It's the backup systems. They're sabotaging the ship," Leclerc said softly. "Humanity's hidden fleet has a hand in this. They knew about this weakness all along." The Exorcian fleet commander, Trash, now visibly panicking, sent a final desperate command to the flagship. But it was too late. The human warships fired the final strike, a concentrated barrage of high-powered energy beams that tore through the failing defenses of the Emperor's flagship. In the next instant, there was a deafening explosion. The flagship, once a symbol of Exorcian supremacy, was now a burning husk, its massive hull collapsing inward under the intense force of the explosion. The battle around it seemed to pause for a moment as the shockwave rippled through space. The Exorcian forces, their once mighty fleet now crippled, began to scatter in a desperate retreat. The human fleet, battered but victorious, surged forward, wiping out the remaining enemy forces with a newfound, unstoppable momentum. "We did it," Nadia whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "We've won." Captain Leclerc stood tall, watching the aftermath of the battle. The Exorcians had been driven back, their dominance shattered. The human fleet, once thought lost to history, had risen again, a symbol of humanity's strength and resilience. But as Leclerc looked out across the battlefield, something deeper settled in his chest, a quiet realization. This was just the beginning. The human race had shown the galaxy what it was capable of, but there was more to be done. There were still countless threats out there, lurking in the dark corners of space. Humanity's journey was far from over. And as the last remnants of the Exorcian fleet disappeared into the distance, Leclerc knew one thing for certain. Humanity had returned to the stars, and it was here to stay.